Hey guys, so the cool thing about the Sony ZV-E10 is the fact that it's got interchangeable lenses. And it's also probably one of the more difficult things about it as well. So I thought I'd cover off a review of some pretty good Sony APS-C E-mount lenses that might help you to understand what might be a good lens for you as you're creating content. So I'm going to focus on this type of scenario, which is what I call like a talking head scenario, where you're framed at around 24 millimeters. So you've got pretty good light going as well. And you're basically doing, a piece to camera, just like I am now. So there's a bunch of other APS-C lenses, like zoom lenses and super wides that can also be really interesting. But I just want to cover off, that main kind of angle of attack for content creation, because I feel like for this camera, this type of content is really a strength for it. Obviously, it's got a lack of stabilization and a little bit of rolling shutter, which probably precludes it from being a fantastic action cam unless you kind of put it into a gimbal or something like that. So I'm going to run through 5 different lenses, and we're going to take a look at some footage, talk about the weight of them when you combine them with the camera, and then talk a little bit about the price as well and kind of why you'd use them. So the first one that I want to talk about is, or have to talk about, I think, is this one. And this is the kit lens that actually comes with the Sony ZV-E10. And this one is a pretty small, light little lens. It's 463 grams, and it's got power to it, so it'll actually work with the zoom lever in the ZV-E10, and it covers off a focal range of 16 millimeters through to 50 millimeters. Now that's full frame millimeters. When you're on an APS-C camera like the Sony ZV-E10, you need to times it by 1.5 to arrive at what they call full frame equivalency. So when you have a 16 millimeter lens at the wide end, when you put it on this camera, it will become a 24 millimeter shot, just like I've got here. And at the wide end, instead of 50, it becomes 75. So you end up with 24 to 75 on a powered zoom lens. So without further ado, let's take a look at this $100 lens and basically how good it looks in a talking head scenario. So this is a test with the Sony ZV-E10 kit lens, which is 16 to 50 millimeter optically stabilized. And this is currently framed up in a 24 millimeter shot, so 16 millimeters on the lens. And the lens is also optically stabilized. The f-stop setting for this, and the lowest that this lens goes, is at 3.5. So I've had to adjust the ISO to ISO 400. How does it look? Okay, so that didn't look too bad considering the cost, and I think it's actually a pretty good value there. So the next lens that I want to talk about, which is kind of widely used for talking head scenarios or vlogging scenarios in the Sony APS-C world, is this Sony lens. It's the Sony 10 to 18 millimeter f4. Now this is a lens that has been around for quite a while, and it's recently had a bit of a resurgence because it's probably one of the most wide-angle lenses that you can get, and that's attractive on crop sensor cameras like the ZV-E10 because that crop factor will turn the 10 to 18 millimeters into 15 to 27 millimeters. So again, this type of range of shot. So it's not the cheapest lens because it is a Sony. It's around $900, and as far as the weight goes once you actually put it on this camera, it's around 581 grams, but still a pretty nice little light combo, if a little expensive. So anyway, let's take a look at the footage in the talking head scenario and let me know what you think. This is the Sony 10 to 18mm f4, and I've had to bump up the ISO settings from ISO 100 that I was using on the main camera, which was the Sigma 16, to ISO 400 to get the same exposure correction that I needed and to have a properly exposed shot. So how does this look like on the 10 to 18mm optically stabilized Sony? Cool, so that looked good. The next lens that I want to talk about is the Sigma 16mm. It's part of that Sigma trio. It's an f1.4, so it's super fast, and it's actually, I'm filming using it right now, so you can see exactly what it looks like, and to me, or to my eye at least, it looks pretty good. So let me swap this lens out so I can actually show it to you and talk about the price and how much it weighs, and let me do that now. Okay, so I've changed out the lenses, and you can probably notice a little bit of a difference here. I've now got the Sony 10 to 18mm f4 on the ZV-E10, and you probably notice over my shoulder that the background is not as blurry anymore. And the reason for that is that this Sony lens is just a little bit slower. And in fact, to maintain the same shutter setting, I had to actually move up the ISO settings to around 400 from where I'd been filming at about ISO 100. So the result is that I've actually got a bit of extra noise in the picture that you probably can't notice because it's still a pretty low level. But it's something that's worth pointing out, I guess, around that Sony 10 to 18. It is an older lens. F4 is going to let in a lot less light than this Sigma 16 and f1.4, so pretty much a much faster lens with a much blurrier, shallow depth of field that delivers a lot of bokeh to you. So this is the Sigma 16. It's pretty much a legend in the vlogging circles. It weighs around, how much does it weigh? It weighs 761 grams, so it's kind of, that's on the ZV-E10. So it's kind of a big boy, but still it's a pretty lethal combo when you consider that this one body only goes for $800, this one's $300, so for $1,100 you've got pretty much a full frame rivaling combination of camera and lens that is going to deliver you a really kind of nice looking shot. Okay, so I'm back on the Sigma 16 f1.4. You can probably notice that the bokeh over my shoulder is back, and that shallow depth of field is back as well. I realized that I really didn't need to actually show you test footage, given the fact that you know, this is the main lens that I've been using for this review of the lenses that are available for the ZV-E10. But I do actually have a bonus lens that I thought actually was worth a mention. So this one is a Sony lens. It is the 16 to 55, and it's actually a G lens. It's not the cheapest lenses going around. It's around $1,400. It's also pretty heavy. Once you made it to this camera, it's around 850 grams, but it's a really good lens. It's pretty sharp, like really sharp G level sharp. It's got F2.8 at any of the adjustments on the focal length from 16 through to 55. Does autofocus, manual focus, pretty much does it all. So if you're looking for perhaps a lens that, yeah, it's more expensive, but could actually do you for more than just, you know, talking head scenarios like that Sigma Prime, then this one actually might not be a bad one to take a look at. So given it's a bonus one, it's probably the most expensive, I think by far, over $1,000 more expensive or $1,100 more expensive than that Sigma. Let's take a look at the footage and see what it looks like. Great, so this is the bonus lens. This is the Sony G lens, 16 to 55 millimeters at f2.8 all the way through. And the only adjustment that I needed to make here was to move the ISO up from ISO 100 to ISO 200 to get the right exposure for the shot. So how does it look? All right, great. Well, that's the set of lenses that I wanted to show you today. It is worth noting that all of those lenses were APS-C lenses, which tend to be a little bit cheaper than the full frame lenses that you might find out there. In fact, once you get into Grandmaster and just even G-level Sony lenses for full frame, you can very quickly get into thousands of dollars worth of investment. Look, they are great, but you might not be best served by buying full frame lenses, and let me explain why. Sony and other companies do constantly update lenses, and in fact older lenses like this F4 Sony aren't actually very common anymore because companies like Sigma have come along with much faster f1.4 lenses. So if you're planning on getting into a full frame camera at some point, you could start buying full frame lenses now and paying that extra, knowing that you'll be able to kind of use them as you get to the full frame. But you need to be aware that they'll be more expensive. You also need to be aware that the crop factor applies. So for example, if you buy a 20mm Sony f1.8, when you put that onto your ZV-E10 before you actually get your full frame camera, it's going to function as a 30mm lens, and a really nice one, but it's going to be 30mm. You won't get the 20 out of it until you actually place it onto a full frame camera. The other thing to note about full frame lenses as well is they've got a lot more glass in them and they're a lot heavier. So just some things to consider there. So anyway, hopefully you've found the lens that you want to use with your ZV-E10 through this video, and I've enjoyed being able to show you kind of a bunch of different lenses that I use. Hopefully it's helpful, and with that I will speak to you guys later. Bye bye.